What if the most peaceful species in the galaxy turned out to be the most terrifying? What if every act of human kindness, every diplomatic solution, every mercy shown was actually a countdown timer to something the universe had never witnessed before? The Galactic Council thought they knew humans. Weak, emotional, quick to forgive and slower to fight. They were wrong. Dead wrong. Because humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, their numbers, or their weapons. It was their infinite capacity for patience, until that patience finally ran out. When the last human ambassador walked out of the council chambers, when the final diplomatic ship left galactic space, when humanity's borders went dark and silent, the galaxy celebrated. They had finally gotten rid of the annoying peacekeepers who always insisted on talking things through. They had no idea they had just triggered the most terrifying protocol in human history. They had no idea that every human smile, every extended hand, every offer of peace had come with an invisible warning label: handle with care. Contents under pressure. The countdown had begun. And, when it reached zero, the galaxy would learn why an entire species that could have conquered everything chose instead to simply ask nicely. Until now. This is the story of humanity's final warning, and why some choices can never be taken back. Ambassador Elena Vesquez stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the species that had once called humanity their allies turn their backs on her. The massive chamber, carved from a single asteroid and polished to mirror brightness, reflected her small human form dozens of times over. Each reflection showed the same thing: a lone figure surrounded by empty space where friends used to stand. The Zephyrians, with their flowing tentacles and wise ancient eyes, had been the first to withdraw their support. Admiral Kethros had personally apologized, his translator device rendering his regret in perfect English. The Council's decision is final, Elena. Humanity's protection of the Meridian refugees goes against galactic law. Elena had smiled then, the same patient smile she had worn for 15 years of diplomatic service. The law that allows slavery, Kethros? That law? The Admiral's tentacles had drooped with something that might have been shame. It is not slavery when they are property by birth. Everything is slavery when beings are owned by other beings. Elena's voice remained calm, measured. She had learned long ago that raising her voice in these chambers only gave them ammunition to call humans emotional and irrational. Next had come the crystalline collective, their geometric forms chiming in harmonic disapproval. They communicated through frequency modulation, but the translation was clear enough: humanity's insistence on intervening in internal affairs of other species was becoming problematic. Elena remembered the last message she had sent to Earth about the collective. They're upset we stopped the harvesting of Kepler 442b. Apparently, the complete extinction of a sentient plant species to make decorative crystals was considered an internal affair. She had paused in her recording then, staring out at the stars. Sometimes I wonder if we're the only ones who see the universe as something other than a resource to be consumed. The Thrakkery Empire had been the most direct. War Commander Vex had slammed his armored fist on the council podium, his 4 eyes blazing with indignation. Humans interfere with natural order. Strong eat weak. This is way of universe. Elena had responded with facts, as she always did. The Thrakkery definition of strong includes using planet-killing weapons against civilizations that haven't invented spaceflight yet. We prefer a different definition of strength. You prefer weakness. Vex had roared. You protect those who cannot protect themselves. Yes, Elena had said simply. We do. Now, 3 hours later, the vote was complete. Humanity's membership in the Galactic Council was revoked. Their trading rights were suspended. Their diplomatic immunity was void. The species they had helped, the worlds they had saved, the conflicts they had resolved through patience and negotiation, none of it mattered anymore. Council Speaker Morgath, a massive blob of sentient plasma contained within a robotic shell, spoke the final verdict. The human species has repeatedly violated Council directives regarding non-interference in sovereign affairs. Despite numerous warnings and sanctions, they continue to project their aberrant moral philosophy onto situations that require practical solutions. Elena listened to the translation, though she understood most of the galactic standard language by now. 15 years of this had taught her many things. Most importantly, it had taught her that the galaxy operated on a very simple principle: might made right, and convenience trumped compassion every single time. Aberrant moral philosophy, she repeated quietly. Around her, the various species began to file out of the chamber, their business concluded. The humans were dealt with. The annoying peacekeepers were silenced. Trade could resume with the Meridian Empire, complete with their slave labor. The Thrakkery could return to their expansion campaigns without human interference. The Crystalline Collective could harvest whatever worlds they pleased. Elena activated her personal communicator, sending a message on a channel that bypassed galactic networks entirely. It was a simple message, just a few words long, but she had hoped for 15 years that she would never have to send it. Protocol 7. Unanimous decision. Withdrawal complete. She closed the channel and turned to leave the chamber. As she walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast space, she noticed something peculiar. The chamber was designed with perfect acoustics, every word spoken in the center could be heard clearly from any point in the room. But Elena's footsteps seemed different now. They didn't just echo. They resonated. At the exit, she paused and turned back one final time. The chamber was empty now except for the maintenance drones beginning their cleaning cycle. She thought about all the speeches she had given here, all the desperate pleas for sanity and compassion she had made to a council that saw these qualities as weaknesses to be exploited rather than strengths to be admired. "You made the wrong choice," she said to the empty chamber. Her words carried clearly in the silence, recorded by systems that would file them away as the final statement of the last human diplomat. She walked out into the corridor, past security guards who no longer needed to show her respect, past alien beings who no longer had to pretend they cared about human opinions on galactic affairs. Her personal belongings had already been collected and loaded onto her ship, a small courtesy extended to prevent an embarrassing scene in the corridors of power. The docking bay was unusually crowded. Elena realized that other human ships were departing as well. Not just diplomatic vessels, but trade ships, research vessels, and civilian transports. She spotted Captain Morrison loading the last of the human medical supplies that had been donated to the Council's emergency reserves. "Taking back our gifts?" Elena asked as she approached. Morrison looked up, his weathered face grim. "Orders came through 20 minutes ago. All human assets to be withdrawn immediately. No exceptions." Elena nodded. She had expected as much. Earth's leadership was nothing if not thorough. If the galaxy wanted humanity gone, then humanity would be gone completely. As her ship undocked from the Council station, Elena activated her ship's communication array for a full-spectrum broadcast. It was time for the final diplomatic protocol, the one she had hoped never to use. "Attention all human vessels, stations, and personnel in galactic space," she began. "By order of the Terran Defense Council and, in accordance with Protocol 7, all human presence is to be withdrawn from non-human space immediately. This includes diplomatic missions, trade operations, research stations, and humanitarian aid programs." She paused, watching the Council station shrink in her viewscreen. Somewhere in that station, she knew they were celebrating. The troublesome humans were finally leaving them alone. All ongoing human commitments to galactic security, peacekeeping, and disaster relief are hereby terminated. All protection agreements with non-human species are void. All military cooperation treaties are dissolved. All technical assistance programs are suspended indefinitely. Elena's voice remained calm and professional, but there was something different about it now. For 15 years, she had been asking for things. Pleading for sanity. Negotiating for peace. Now she was simply stating facts. As of this moment, humanity withdraws all support for galactic civilization and returns to purely defensive posture within Terran space. We wish you success in your future endeavors. She closed the channel and sat back in her pilot's seat. Through the viewscreen, she could see dozens of human ships heading toward the edge of Council space, their running lights creating streams of light against the dark. Each ship represented years of human effort to be part of something larger than themselves. Each ship carried people who had believed that cooperation was better than isolation, that diversity made everyone stronger, that problems could be solved through understanding rather than force. Elena's personal communicator chimed. A message from Earth, routed through quantum entanglement networks that bypassed galactic infrastructure entirely. Welcome home, Elena. You did everything you could. She smiled, but it was different from the patient diplomatic smile she had worn for so many years. This smile had an edge to it. No, she said to herself. We did everything we could. Now we do everything else. Behind her, the council station continued its normal operations. Ships came and went, bringing trade goods and diplomatic pouches and news from across the galaxy. The various species conducted their business with the satisfaction that comes from eliminating an annoyance. None of them noticed that the ships leaving weren't just human vessels. Mixed in with the diplomatic and trade ships were others. Ships that had been operating in galactic space for 15 years but had never been logged with council records. Ships that carried sensors instead of cargo. Ships that had been watching, recording, learning, and mapping every aspect of galactic civilization with the quiet thoroughness that humanity brought to everything they did. Elena's ship passed through the outer marker of council space and entered the neutral zone between galactic territory and the Terran hegemony. Here, space seemed different somehow. Emptier. More waiting than empty. Her communicator chimed again. This time it was a general broadcast on human frequencies, originating from Earth itself. Elena recognized the voice immediately, Admiral Sarah Chen, head of Terran Defense. To all returning personnel, welcome home. Your service has been exemplary and your patience has been noted. Phase 1 is complete. All human assets have been successfully withdrawn from galactic space. Intelligence gathering operations have concluded. Defensive preparations are complete. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Defensive preparations. She had known this day would come, had even helped plan for it, but hearing the words made it real in a way that planning never could. Phase 2 begins immediately, the Admiral continued. All returning vessels are to report to their designated assembly points. All personnel are to prepare for extended duty. All non-essential systems are to be placed on standby. We are now in a state of siege readiness. The transmission ended, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the vast emptiness of space. Behind her, the galaxy continued its business, unaware that they had just made the worst mistake in the history of civilized space. They had pushed away the only species that had ever tried to be their friend. Now they would discover what humanity looked like when it stopped trying to be friendly. Elena's ship entered Terran space 6 hours later. As she passed through the outer sensor networks, she was amazed by what she saw. The space around Earth was filled with ships, but not like anything she had ever seen before. These weren't the sleek diplomatic vessels or the sturdy cargo haulers that humanity had used in galactic space. These were something entirely different. They were warships, but warships like no one in the galaxy had ever imagined. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of technology far beyond what humanity had ever revealed. Their hulls seemed to bend light around them, making them difficult to focus on directly. And there were so many of them. Jesus, Elena whispered. How long have we been preparing for this? Her communicator crackled with a response from traffic control. Since the day we made first contact, Elena. Since the very first day we realized what the galaxy was really like. Elena understood then. Every diplomatic failure, every time humanity had been overruled by species that valued strength over compassion, every instance where they had been told that their moral philosophy was aberrant, it had all been carefully documented and analyzed. Humanity had spent 15 years learning exactly how galactic civilization worked, and they had spent those same 15 years preparing for the day when they would have to defend themselves against it. As her ship was guided to its assigned docking bay, Elena realized that the galaxy had made a fundamental error in their understanding of humanity. They thought humans were weak because they chose diplomacy over force. They thought humans were naive because they believed in cooperation over competition. They had never stopped to consider what would happen when a species that was capable of building that massive fleet chose diplomacy instead. They had never asked themselves what humanity was capable of when they tried their absolute hardest to be peaceful. Now they were about to find out. Elena docked her ship and made her way to the debriefing center, where hundreds of other returning diplomats, traders, and researchers were already waiting. The mood was somber but determined. These were people who had spent years trying to build bridges, only to watch them burn. Ambassador Vasquez, a familiar voice called out. Elena turned to see Dr. Marcus Webb, the former head of Human Scientific Exchange Programs. His usually cheerful face was grim. How bad was it in the council chambers? Complete rejection, Elena replied. Unanimous vote. They seemed almost relieved to be rid of us. Marcus nodded slowly. Same reaction when they cancelled the research partnerships. 15 years of shared discovery, 15 years of teaching them our medical techniques and getting nothing but complaints that we were interfering with natural selection. Around them, other conversations painted a similar picture. The galaxy had decided that humanity's greatest gift, their refusal to accept that suffering was inevitable, was actually their greatest flaw. Elena thought about the Meridian refugees, the plant people of Kepler 442b, the countless other species that humanity had helped over the years. All of them were now at the mercy of a galactic community that saw mercy itself as a weakness. They're going to regret this, she said quietly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. The refugees? No, Elena replied, her voice carrying the same edge as her earlier smile. The Council. As if summoned by her words, Admiral Chen's voice echoed through the debriefing center from speakers that Elena hadn't even noticed. The Admiral's tone was calm, professional, but there was something underneath it that Elena had never heard before in 15 years of diplomatic service. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome home. Your service has been exemplary, and your patience has been noted by history. But patience, like all virtues, has its limits. Today, the Galactic Council chose to cross that limit. Elena felt the room grow quiet around her. Hundreds of humans who had spent years trying to make peace were now listening to something that sounded very much like a declaration of war. For 15 years, we have tried to be the species we wished others could be. We have offered friendship to those who preferred dominance. We have offered help to those who preferred exploitation. We have offered hope to those who preferred despair. The Admiral paused, and Elena could hear something in that silence that made her blood run cold. Today, they made their choice. They chose a galaxy without humanity in it. They chose a universe where might makes right and the strong devour the weak. They chose a reality where suffering is natural and compassion is aberrant. Elena realized she was holding her breath. Very well. They shall have exactly what they chose. And, when they beg us to change our minds, when they come crawling back asking for the help they rejected, when they finally understand what they threw away. The silence stretched on for a long moment before the Admiral's final words echoed through the room. We will remind them that some choices cannot be undone. 3 months after the human withdrawal, the first cracks began to show. Admiral Kethros of the Zephyrian Navy stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display with growing unease. The red markers representing pirate fleets had tripled in number since humanity had left galactic space. What had once been manageable raids on shipping lanes had become a full-scale crisis. Admiral, his tactical officer called out, the Meridian Empire is moving another battle fleet toward the Outer Rim territories. Intelligence suggests they're targeting the Kepler mining colonies. Kethros felt his tentacles twitch with frustration. The Kepler colonies were protected under 17 different galactic treaties, but enforcement had always been complicated. The Meridians claimed the colonies were stealing resources from traditional Meridian territory, despite the fact that the colonies had been there for over 2 centuries. What's the Council's response? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Secretary General Morgath has issued a statement calling for peaceful resolution through dialogue between all parties. The tactical officer's tone suggested exactly what he thought of that particular solution. Kethros closed his 3 eyes and tried to remember how these situations used to be handled. There had been a protocol, a system that had worked for 15 years. When territorial disputes arose, when pirates threatened shipping, when strong species began to prey on weaker ones, there had always been. Sir, his communications officer interrupted his thoughts, we're receiving a distress call from the Kepler colonies. They're requesting immediate assistance. From us? Kethros asked. We're 3 days away at maximum warp. No, sir. They're transmitting on old emergency frequencies. The message isn't addressed to us at all. Kethros felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. Show me. The communication played on the bridge speakers, crackling with interference from the long-range transmission. A desperate voice, speaking in the trade language that most colonies used, Mayday, Mayday. This is Governor Chen of Kepler Station. We have 17 Meridian battlecruisers approaching our position. They're demanding immediate surrender and evacuation. We are a civilian colony with no military assets. Please respond. Anyone. We need help. The message repeated 3 times before ending. Kethros noticed that the timestamp showed the transmission was already 6 hours old. Have they received any response? He asked quietly. No, sir. The frequencies they're using, they're the old human emergency response channels. No one monitors those anymore. Kethros understood now. For 15 years, when colonies sent out distress calls, when weaker species faced extinction, when pirates threatened civilian vessels, help had always come. Not from the Council, which moved slowly and deliberated endlessly, but from humanity. The humans had maintained emergency response fleets, rapid deployment forces, and negotiation teams that could arrive anywhere in Council space within hours. Sir, the tactical officer spoke up again, we're receiving updates on the Kepler situation. The Meridians have begun orbital bombardment of the mining installations. They're claiming the colonists are trespassing on sovereign territory and refusing to leave. Kethros turned to his navigation officer. How long would it take us to reach Kepler at maximum warp? 73 hours, sir. And how long do you estimate the colonists have? Based on the bombardment pattern, maybe 6 hours before their life support systems fail. The bridge fell silent. 17,000 civilians were about to die, and the nearest help was 3 days away. In the old system, this would never have been a problem. A human rapid response ship would have been there within the hour, probably with Admiral Sarah Chun herself demanding to speak with whoever was in charge of the bombardment. Sir, the communications officer said softly, should I relay the distress call to Council headquarters? Kethros almost laughed. Council headquarters was 8 days away by fastest courier. By the time they finished debating the legal implications of intervention, there wouldn't be anyone left to save. Yes, he said finally. Relay the message. And prepare a priority transmission to Admiral Chen. His entire bridge crew turned to stare at him. The tactical officer spoke first. Sir, Admiral Chen is Human Defense Force. We have no formal diplomatic channels with humanity anymore. I'm aware of that, Kethros replied. Send the message anyway. The message he composed was simple. Admiral Chen, this is Admiral Kethros of the Zephyrian Navy. Kepler colonies under attack by Meridian Empire. 17,000 civilians. 6 hours to live. We cannot reach them in time. We have no right to ask this of you, but they will all die if someone doesn't help them. He paused, his tentacles hovering over the transmission controls. Sending this message was probably treason. The Council had specifically forbidden any contact with human forces. But 17,000 people were about to die because no one else cared enough to help them. Send it, he ordered. The message transmitted into the void between galactic space and the human territories. Kethros didn't expect a response. Why would humanity help people who had just thrown them out of galactic civilization? Why would they risk their lives for colonies that had supported the Council's decision to revoke human membership? 40 minutes later, his communications array lit up with an incoming transmission from Terran space. The message was audio only, and Admiral Chen's voice was cold as stellar vacuum. Admiral Kethros. Your transmission received. Stand by. That was it. No confirmation that they would help, no questions about the tactical situation, no demands for Council authorization. Just stand by. Kethros found himself staring at the tactical display, watching the Meridian fleet continue its bombardment of the colonies. The life support readings from Kepler Station were dropping steadily. The colonists had stopped transmitting distress calls, probably to conserve power for their shields. "Sir," his sensor operator called out suddenly. "I'm detecting massive quantum signatures at the edge of the system. Something big just dropped out of hyperspace." "Show me," Kethros ordered. The tactical display updated, and Kethros felt his 3 hearts skip a beat. 6 ships had appeared at the system's edge, but they weren't like anything he had ever seen before. They were sleek, almost organic in appearance, and they were moving toward Kepler at speeds that should have been impossible. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead ship." It's Admiral Chun herself." "Put her through." The viewscreen activated, showing the bridge of a ship that looked more like the inside of a living creature than a military vessel. Admiral Chen stood in the center, still wearing the same uniform Kethros remembered, but everything else about her seemed different. "Harder. Colder." "Admiral Kethros," she said without preamble. "I am ordering you to withdraw your forces to minimum safe distance." "Admiral Chen, I must protest." "This is galactic space, and you have no authority." "Admiral," Chen interrupted, her voice carrying a tone that made Kethros' tentacles curl involuntarily, "I am not here as a representative of humanity. I am here as a private citizen who happens to own 6 of the most advanced warships ever constructed. What I do here today has nothing to do with galactic law or council authority." Kethros realized what she was saying. By claiming to act as a private citizen, she was removing any diplomatic protection from her actions. If the council wanted to declare her a pirate or terrorist, they could do so without it reflecting on humanity as a whole. "Understood," he said quietly. "We will maintain safe distance." Chen nodded once and closed the channel. On the tactical display, Kethros watched as the 6 human ships accelerated beyond anything he had thought possible. They covered the distance to Kepler in minutes rather than hours. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations. The Meridian battle fleet was positioned in standard bombardment formation around Kepler Station, their massive ships raining destruction on the colony's shields. They were so focused on their target that they didn't notice the approaching human vessels until it was too late. The first Meridian ship simply stopped. One moment it was firing on the colony, the next it was drifting dead in space, all its systems offline. Then, the second ship stopped. Then, the third. Admiral Chen's voice came across all frequencies, calm and professional. "Meridian vessels, this is Admiral Sarah Chen. You will cease bombardment immediately and withdraw from this system. You have 30 seconds to comply." The response from the Meridian flagship was immediate and predictable. "Human vessel, you have no authority here. We are conducting lawful operations under Meridian sovereignty. Withdraw or be destroyed." Chen's reply was delivered in the same calm tone, 25 seconds. The Meridians opened fire on the human ships, their massive energy weapons designed to crack planetary crusts. The beams struck the human vessels and simply disappeared. The exotic hulls seemed to absorb the energy like water soaking into sand. 15 seconds. More Meridian ships began firing, their combined firepower enough to sterilize a small moon. The human ships continued their approach, unaffected. 10 seconds. The Meridian admiral began screaming orders for retreat, but it was too late. The human ships had closed to optimal range. "Time's up." Kethros watched in horror and fascination as the human ships opened fire. But they weren't using energy weapons or projectiles. Instead, they seemed to be using some kind of technology that interfered with the fundamental forces holding matter together. The Meridian ships didn't explode or burn, they simply came apart, their hulls dissolving into component atoms that dispersed harmlessly into space. In less than 30 seconds, 17 Meridian battlecruisers had been reduced to clouds of metallic dust. Admiral Chen's voice came across the emergency frequencies one final time. "Kepler Station, this is Admiral Chen. Threat neutralized. Are you in need of medical or engineering assistance?" The response from the colony was immediate and filled with tears of relief. "Admiral, this is Governor Chen. We can't thank you enough. Our life support is failing, and we have wounded." "Stand by for emergency aid," Chen replied. "We'll have you stable within the hour." Kethros watched as the human ships moved into position around the colony, deploying repair drones and medical shuttles with the efficiency of a force that had performed this operation thousands of times before. His communications officer looked up from his station. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from Admiral Chen. It's directed specifically to you. Put her through." Chen's face appeared on the view screen again, but this time she looked tired rather than angry. "Admiral Kethros, thank you for the warning. Those people would have died if you hadn't contacted us." Kethros felt his tentacles drooping with shame. "Admiral, I must ask, why did you come? After what the Council did, after how we treated your people?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring at something off-screen. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but somehow more frightening than before. "Because that's who we are, Admiral. We save people. Even when they don't want us to. Even when they think we're wrong for doing it. Even when they throw us out and tell us never to come back." She paused, and, when she continued, there was something in her voice that made Kethros' blood run cold. "But, understand this, Admiral. This is the last time. The next colony that calls for help, the next species that faces extinction, the next time pirates threaten civilian vessels, they'll call out on those emergency frequencies and hear nothing but silence." "Admiral, surely you don't mean I mean exactly what I said. Humanity is done being the galaxy's police force. We're done being the species that cares more about others than they care about themselves. The Council made their choice. They wanted a galaxy without human interference. Congratulations. You've got one." The transmission ended, leaving Kethros staring at a blank screen. On the tactical display, he could see the human ships finishing their rescue operations at Kepler Station. Within 2 hours, they had completely repaired the colony's life support, treated all the wounded, and even upgraded their defensive systems. Then, as suddenly as they had arrived, the human ships disappeared back into hyperspace, leaving no trace of their presence except for the metallic clouds that had once been Meridian warships. Kethros' sensor operator looked up from his station. "Admiral, I'm detecting life pods from the destroyed Meridian ships. Should we render assistance?" Kethros considered the question. The Meridians had been attempting genocide just hours earlier. They had ignored galactic law, defied Council authority, and tried to murder 17,000 civilians for the crime of existing in space the Meridians wanted. But they were still living beings, and leaving them to die in space was... "Yes," he said finally. "Rescue the survivors." As his ships moved to collect the life pods, Kethros realized that he had just proven Admiral Chen's point. Even now, even after everything that had happened, he couldn't simply let people die when he had the power to save them. It was probably a weakness, by galactic standards. It was certainly impractical. But it was also, he realized, the most human thing he had ever done. The rescue operation took 6 hours. When it was complete, Kethros found himself with 200 Meridian survivors in his ship's holding bays, including the admiral who had ordered the attack on Kepler Station. "What will you do with us?" the Meridian admiral asked when Kethros went to see him in the detention area. Kethros studied the warrior, noting the way his forearms were crossed in defiance even though he was clearly terrified. "I will turn you over to Council authorities for trial," Kethros replied. "Though I suspect the charges will be reduced to aggressive expansion and you'll be released within a year." The Meridian admiral looked confused. "Then, why did you save us? If you believe we deserve to be punished, why not let us die?" Kethros thought about Admiral Chen's words, about humanity's decision to withdraw from galactic affairs, about the 17,000 colonists who would be alive only because one human had decided to act as a private citizen. "Because," he said finally, "someone has to be better than the worst thing we're capable of. Someone has to care about life even when it's inconvenient. Someone has to be willing to help even when helping is foolish." The Meridian stared at him for a long moment. "That sounds like something a human would say." Kethros nodded slowly. "Yes. I believe it is." As his ships entered hyperspace for the journey back to Council space, Kethros composed his report on the Kepler incident. He wrote about the Meridian attack, about the colony's distress call, about the mysterious appearance of unidentified vessels that had resolved the situation. He did not mention contacting Admiral Chen. He did not mention the human ships or their impossible technology. He certainly did not mention the way those ships had dismantled 17 battlecruisers without seeming to exert any effort at all. Some things, he decided, were better left as military secrets. But, as he finished his report, Kethros found himself wondering how many other situations like Kepler were developing throughout galactic space. How many distress calls were going unanswered? How many colonies were facing extinction while the Council debated legal procedures? How many people were going to die because the galaxy had decided it didn't want humanity's help anymore? The answer, he feared, was more than anyone could count. In the depths of space, 17,000 colonists went about their daily lives, never knowing how close they had come to extinction. The Meridian Empire filed a formal complaint with the Council about pirate attacks on their legitimate salvage operations. The Council issued a statement expressing concern about the concerning increase in unlawful activities in the outer systems. And, somewhere in the darkness between the stars, humanity watched and listened and did absolutely nothing. The silence had begun. 6 months after Kepler, the galaxy was burning. Council Speaker Morgath floated in his containment chamber at the center of the emergency session, his plasma form pulsing with agitation. The Great Council chamber, once filled with the confident voices of galactic civilization's leaders, now echoed with desperation and barely contained panic. "The numbers are undeniable," reported General Fex of the Outer Rim Defense Force, his insectoid features clicking with nervous energy. "Piracy has increased by 400%. Slave raids are at levels not seen since the Dark Ages. 17 species have gone extinct in the past 3 months alone." War Commander Vex of the Thrakkery Empire slammed his armored fist on his podium. "This is natural order. Strong devour weak. Why do council members suddenly develop human weakness?" "Because the weak included 3 Thrakkery border colonies last month," Admiral Kethros replied coldly. Perhaps the War Commander's definition of natural order seems less appealing when his own people are the ones being devoured. Vex's 4 eyes blazed with fury, but he couldn't deny the truth. The Thrakkery had built their empire on the principle that might made right, and they had always been the mightiest. But now they were facing an enemy that didn't care about their warrior tradition or their superior weapons. The Void Hunters had emerged from the dark space beyond the galactic rim, and they consumed everything in their path, strong and weak alike. "The Void Hunters have taken 14 systems in the past month," General Fex continued, his mandibles chattering with stress. "Their ships seem to feed on energy itself. Conventional weapons are useless against them." "What about unconventional weapons?" asked Council Member ZYTH of the Crystalline Collective, her geometric form chiming with harmonic frequencies of concern. The silence that followed was answer enough. The galaxy's military forces were designed to fight wars against other galactic species, beings that followed the same basic laws of physics and used similar technologies. The Void Hunters were something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist according to every scientific model the Council possessed. Speaker Morgath pulsed a deeper red, indicating his distress. "Has there been any response from the affected systems? Any indication of how they're defending themselves?" "That's the problem," General Fex replied. "There is no defense. The Void Hunters arrive, consume everything in a system, and move on. No survivors, no refugees, no witnesses. Just empty space where entire civilizations used to exist." Admiral Kethros shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "There was one incident. The Tau Ceti system sent out a distress call before the Void Hunters arrived. It was transmitted on the old human emergency frequencies." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what those frequencies were for, and everyone knew that no one was listening anymore. "Did anyone respond to the call?" Speaker Morgath asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "No," Kethros replied. "Tau Ceti went dark 6 hours after the transmission." War Commander Vex growled low in his throat. "Humans abandon galaxy when we need them most. Proves they are weak, unreliable allies." "We threw them out," Kethros snapped, his tentacles writhing with suppressed anger. "We told them their help was unwanted. We voted unanimously to revoke their membership. What exactly did you expect would happen?" Enough, Speaker Morgath commanded, his robotic shell pulsing with authority. Recriminations will not solve our current crisis. We need solutions. Councilmember ZYTH chimed a pattern that translated as deep concern. Perhaps we should consider reaching out. The humans have experience with unconventional threats. Their technology might be more adaptable than ours. The suggestion hung in the air like a toxic gas. Every being in the chamber knew it made sense, but none of them wanted to be the first to admit it. War Commander Vex stood up, his massive frame dominating his section of the chamber. Thrakkery Empire will not beg humans for help. We are warriors. We will find way to defeat these void hunters ourselves. With what? Admiral Kethros asked quietly. Your most advanced battle fleet lasted exactly 17 minutes against a single void hunter ship. The debris field is still expanding through the Rigel system. Vex's 4 eyes blazed, but he sat down without responding. The destruction of the Thrakkery 7th Fleet had been broadcast across galactic networks as a warning to other species. It hadn't been a battle, it had been a feeding. General Vex activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's current strategic situation. Red zones marked areas where the void hunters had struck. Yellow zones indicated systems under immediate threat. Green zones showed areas that were still secure. There wasn't much green left. At current rate of expansion, General Vex reported, the void hunters will reach the core worlds within 8 months. Our combined military forces might delay them by a few weeks, but we cannot stop them. What about evacuation? Asked Councilmember Rix of the Centauri Alliance. Can we relocate our populations to safer regions? Where? Admiral Kethros asked. The void hunters are expanding in all directions simultaneously. There is nowhere to run that they won't eventually reach. Speaker Morgath pulsed a color that indicated deep thought. There must be some option we haven't considered. Some weapon or strategy that could work against them. There is, a new voice said from the chamber's entrance. Every being in the room turned to see a figure standing in the doorway. She was human, wearing the simple uniform of a starship captain, and she walked with the confident stride of someone who belonged wherever she chose to be. Captain Harrison, Admiral Kethros said, rising from his chair. You're not supposed to be here. Captain Lisa Harrison, formerly of the Human Medical Corps and, currently, well, no one was quite sure what her current status was. She had been one of the last humans to leave Council space, and she had been periodically spotted in the outer systems ever since, always just ahead of whatever crisis was developing. I'm a private citizen traveling on a civilian vessel, Harrison replied with a slight smile. Last time I checked, Council space was still open to civilian traffic. Explain your presence, War Commander Vex demanded. What do you know about fighting void hunters? Harrison walked to the center of the chamber, her boots clicking on the polished floor. I know that they're not actually from outside the galaxy. I know that they're not natural predators. And I know that they're not unstoppable. The chamber erupted in voices, questions, demands, and accusations flying from every direction. Harrison waited patiently for the noise to die down before continuing. The void hunters are artificial constructs, created by a species that went extinct about 2 million years ago. They were designed as a final weapon, a way to ensure that no one could inherit their territory if they couldn't keep it themselves. Speaker Morgath pulsed in urgent orange. How could you possibly know this? Because humanity has been dealing with them for the past 6 months, Harrison replied calmly. They hit our outer colonies first, before moving into galactic space. We've fought 17 major engagements against them. Impossible, General Vex chittered. If humans had engaged the void hunters, we would have detected the battles. Harrison's smile grew wider. Would you? You've been monitoring human space, General? The implication was clear, and deeply embarrassing. The Council had expelled humanity from galactic civilization, but they had continued to spy on human territory. And they had detected nothing, no battles, no preparations, no indication that humanity was facing the same threat that was destroying the galaxy. How? Admiral Kethros asked simply. How did we fight them, or how did we win? Harrison replied. Both. Harrison activated a personal holographic projector, displaying a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Human space was marked in blue, and, scattered throughout it were small red indicators. The Void Hunters attacked our colonies first because they were the most isolated, the easiest targets. But, humans don't fight the way the rest of you do. We don't line up our biggest ships and see who can hit harder. We adapt. The holographic display zoomed in on one of the red indicators, showing a detailed tactical analysis of a battle. It was unlike anything anyone in the chamber had ever seen: human ships that seemed to phase in and out of normal space, weapons that targeted the fundamental forces holding matter together, defensive systems that turned enemy attacks into additional power for human systems. The Void Hunters are energy parasites, Harrison explained. They feed on conventional power sources, fusion reactors, antimatter cores, stellar energy. But they can't digest quantum entanglement, and they can't process zero-point energy. Zero-point energy is theoretical, Council Member ZYTH chimed skeptically. Is it? Harrison asked. You might want to update your science textbooks. Humanity has been using quantum power sources for 20 years. We just never mentioned it because we were trying to be polite neighbors instead of technological superiors. The implications of that statement hit the chamber like a physical blow. For 20 years, while humanity had been playing the role of junior partners in galactic civilization, they had possessed technology that made every other species obsolete. Why? War Commander Vex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why pretend to be weak? Harrison's expression grew sad. Because we hoped you would grow into something better. Because we believed that cooperation was more valuable than dominance. Because we thought that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy could become a place where beings helped each other instead of competing to see who could be the most cruel. But, you were wrong, Admiral Kethros said. Yes, Harrison replied. We were wrong. Speaker Morgath pulsed a deep purple, indicating urgent negotiation mode. Captain Harrison, humanity clearly possesses the capability to defend against the Void Hunters. The Council would be grateful for any assistance you could provide. Harrison laughed, and the sound was cold enough to make several Council members shiver. Grateful? The same Council that unanimously voted to expel humanity from galactic civilization is now grateful for our help? The situation has changed, Speaker Morgath replied. Perhaps the Council was hasty in its previous decision. Hasty? Harrison repeated. You called our moral philosophy aberrant. You said our insistence on helping the weak was a threat to galactic stability. You told us that our presence in the Council was no longer welcome. Does the approach of extinction suddenly make our philosophy more palatable? The chamber fell silent. Everyone present had voted for humanity's expulsion, and everyone present now needed humanity's help to survive. What do you want? General Fex asked bluntly. Harrison considered the question for a long moment, her eyes moving from one council member to another. Nothing, she said finally. Humanity wants nothing from the Galactic Council. Then, why are you here? War Commander Vex demanded. To inform you that humanity will be defending human space and human colonies against the Void Hunter threat. We will not be extending that protection to galactic territory. The implications hit like a thunderbolt. Council Member Rix leaned forward in his chair. You're going to let us all die? We're going to let you handle your own problems, Harrison corrected. Just like you wanted. You spent 15 years telling us that our help was unwanted, that our protection was insulting, that your species were perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. Congratulations. You finally get to prove it. Admiral Kethros stood up slowly. Captain, surely there's some arrangement we can make. Some agreement that would benefit everyone. Admiral, Harrison replied, her voice gentle but implacable. 6 months ago, the Council could have had humanity as full partners in defending the galaxy. 3 months ago, you could have had us as reluctant allies fighting a common enemy. Even 1 month ago, you could have had our technology and expertise in exchange for a formal apology and reinstatement. And, now? Speaker Morgath asked, though his color had shifted to a gray that suggested he already knew the answer. Now you get to keep the galaxy you voted for, Harrison said. A galaxy where the strong survive and the weak perish. A galaxy where cooperation is weakness and mercy is aberrant. A galaxy where everyone takes care of themselves and no one interferes in anyone else's business. She turned to leave, then paused at the chamber entrance. The Void Hunters will reach the core worlds in 8 months, just like General Thex calculated. They'll consume every form of conventional energy they encounter. But there is a way to stop them. The entire chamber held its breath. Quantum resonance cascade, Harrison continued. If you can generate a galaxy-wide quantum field at exactly the right frequency, you can disrupt their feeding process long enough to drive them back into dark space. How do we generate such a field? Council member ZYTH asked desperately. Harrison smiled one final time, and it was the saddest expression anyone in the chamber had ever seen. You would need the cooperation of every major species in the galaxy, working together with perfect synchronization. You would need to set aside territorial disputes, resource conflicts, and ideological differences long enough to focus on a common goal. You would need to trust each other completely, share your most advanced technologies freely, and coordinate your efforts with a single unified command structure. She paused, letting the impossibility of that scenario sink in. In other words, you would need to become exactly the kind of galactic community that humanity tried to help you build for 15 years. The same community you rejected because it required you to care more about others than about yourselves. With that, Captain Harrison walked out of the chamber, leaving behind the leaders of galactic civilization to contemplate the price of their pride. For a long time after she left, no one spoke. The holographic display still showed the expanding red zones where the Void Hunters continued their methodical consumption of everything in their path. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Without help, galactic civilization would be extinct within a year. We could surrender, Council Member Rick said quietly. Acknowledge our mistake and beg humanity for forgiveness. Never, War Commander Vex snarled. Thrakkeray do not beg. Then, Thrakkeray will die, Admiral Kethros replied. Along with everyone else. Speaker Morgath pulsed a deep red, indicating maximum distress. Perhaps we should consider Captain Harrison's suggestion. If we could unite the galaxy, coordinate our efforts. Look around this chamber, General Thex said bitterly. We can barely agree on what to have for lunch, much less coordinate a galaxy-wide defense. Half the species represented here are currently at war with each other. Then, we're doomed, Council Member ZYTH chimed sadly. Perhaps, Admiral Kethros said slowly, that was always the point. What do you mean? Speaker Morgath asked. Kethros gestured toward the chamber's exit, where Captain Harrison had disappeared. She didn't come here to offer us salvation. She came to show us exactly what we threw away. She came to make sure we understood the full cost of our decision. You think this is revenge? War Commander Vex asked. No, Kethros replied. I think this is justice. We spent 15 years rejecting everything humanity offered, their friendship, their help, their vision of what the galaxy could become. Now we get to live in the galaxy we chose instead. As the council session dissolved into argument and recrimination, as species blamed each other for their collective fate, as the red zones on the tactical display continued to expand, one thing became crystal clear: the galaxy had made its choice, and now it would live, or die, with the consequences. In the darkness beyond the galactic rim, the Void Hunters continued their inexorable advance, consuming everything in their path and growing stronger with each system they devoured. And, in human space, behind barriers of quantum energy that the Hunters couldn't penetrate, humanity watched and waited and did exactly what the galaxy had asked them to do: nothing at all. The Galactic Council was dying, and everyone could smell the decay. Admiral Kethros stood in what had once been the Grand Strategy Center of Council headquarters, watching the tactical displays paint an increasingly hopeless picture. The Void Hunters had consumed 63 star systems in the past month alone. Refugee fleets clogged the spaceways leading to the core worlds, carrying the survivors of civilizations that had existed for millennia and were now nothing but expanding clouds of cosmic dust. Status report, he called out, though he already knew the numbers would be worse than yesterday's. Commander Ithek, his aide-de-camp, consulted her data pad with the mechanical precision that had become their only defense against despair. the outer rim is completely lost, sir. The mid-rim worlds are evacuating at maximum capacity. We're projecting complete population transfer to the core systems within 6 weeks. And the Void Hunters? Accelerating, sir. They've learned to feed more efficiently. Each system they consume makes them stronger and faster. Kethros closed his 3 eyes and tried to remember what hope felt like. The mathematics were brutal and inescapable. Even if they managed to evacuate every living being from the outer and mid-rim worlds, the core worlds couldn't support that population density. They were looking at the collapse of galactic civilization either way, quickly through Void Hunter consumption, or slowly through resource depletion and social breakdown. Sir, Commander Ithek continued, there's been another development. The Meridian Empire has formally withdrawn from the Council Defense Pact. Kethros felt his tentacles sag with exhaustion. Let me guess, they're focusing on protecting their own interests. Emperor Vashek's statement was quite clear, sir. He said that the Empire would not waste resources defending weak species who cannot defend themselves when those resources could be used to fortify Meridian core territories. Of course. The same empire that had spent centuries preying on weaker species was now abandoning the alliance the moment it required sacrifice instead of offering profit. It was almost poetically appropriate. How many ships does that leave us? Kethros asked. For the entire galaxy? Maybe 3,000 effective combat vessels, sir. The Void Hunters have consumed or scattered the rest. 3,000 ships to defend what remained of galactic civilization. The Void Hunters had already demonstrated that conventional weapons were useless against them, which meant those 3,000 ships were effectively paper airplanes flying into a hurricane. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the Centauri Alliance. It's marked as Priority 1. Put it through. Prime Minister Rix appeared on the main view screen, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled and his compound eyes darting nervously. Behind him, Kethros could see smoke rising from what looked like burning cities. Admiral Kethros, Rix said without preamble, the Alliance is formally requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Our worlds are under direct assault by Void Hunter advance scouts. I'm sorry, Prime Minister, but we don't have any ships available for evacuation. Every vessel in the fleet is committed to refugee operations in the mid-rim. Rix's compound eyes focused on the camera with desperate intensity. Admiral, there are 40 billion people in the Centauri system. We need help. I understand, sir, but we're transmitting our distress call on all frequencies, Rix interrupted. Including the old human emergency channels. The statement hung between them like an admission of defeat. Both of them knew that no one was monitoring those channels anymore, that the calls would echo through space forever without receiving any response. Prime Minister, Kethros said gently, perhaps you should focus on whatever evacuation assets you have available. Every ship, every transport, every vessel that can carry refugees to the core worlds. Rix's image flickered as interference began to disrupt the transmission. Admiral, you don't understand. The core worlds announced this morning that they're implementing immigration quotas. They're only accepting economically viable populations and species with strategic value to defense operations. Kethros felt his heart stop. They're what? The core worlds are closing their borders, Admiral. They're deciding who gets to live and who gets to die based on how useful they might be. The transmission cut out, leaving Kethros staring at a blank screen. Around him, the command center continued its methodical tracking of galactic collapse, but everything felt hollow now. They weren't even pretending to care about everyone anymore. The crisis had revealed what galactic civilization really was underneath all the diplomatic niceties, a collection of species united only by convenience, ready to sacrifice each other the moment survival became difficult. Sir, Commander Ithek said quietly, there's something else you should know. The Thrakkery Empire has implemented what they're calling strategic population consolidation. Meaning? They're abandoning their outer colonies and concentrating their population on fortress worlds. But, sir, they're only evacuating Thrakkery citizens. They're leaving behind all the conquered populations, all the slave species, all the refugees who had sought shelter in Thrakkery space. Kethros understood. The Thrakkery were essentially committing genocide by abandonment, condemning billions of beings to death by Void Hunter rather than waste resources protecting them. How many? He asked. Approximately 200 billion beings, sir. 200 billion. Kethros tried to comprehend the number, but it was too large, too abstract. It was easier to think of them as statistics rather than individuals with families, dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. Sir, his communications officer called out again, we're receiving multiple transmissions on the human emergency frequencies. It appears that various governments and colonies are attempting to contact humanity directly. Put them through, Kethros ordered. The main speakers crackled with a cacophony of desperate voices. This is Governor Chen of New Singapore. We have 15 million refugees from the Outer Rim. Our life support systems are failing. Please, if anyone is listening, Kepler station to any human vessels. The Void Hunters have breached our outer defenses. We need immediate evacuation for calling on emergency frequency 77 Alpha. This is Admiral Zara of the Vegan Defense Force. Our entire fleet has been destroyed. We have civilian transports full of children heading for human space. Please, just give them safe passage. Anyone listening? This is Dr. Sarah Kim at the Tau Ceti Research Facility. We've discovered something important about the Void Hunters, but we need protection to complete our research. The voices went on and on, dozens of different species in dozens of different languages, all calling out to the humans who had left galactic space 8 months ago. All begging for help from the people they had thrown away. Turn it off, Kethros said quietly. Sir? Turn it off. I can't listen to any more. The communications officer cut the audio, leaving the command center in blessed silence. But Kethros could still hear the voices in his head, could still feel the weight of all those desperate pleas echoing through empty space. Sir, Commander Ithek said hesitantly, there have been some unofficial proposals from various council members. Suggestions that perhaps we should consider sending a formal delegation to human space. To beg, Kethros said flatly. To negotiate, sir. Kethros almost laughed. Negotiate with what? What exactly do we have to offer humanity now that we didn't have 8 months ago when we threw them out? Our apology, sir? This time Kethros did laugh, and the sound was bitter enough to make his staff wince. An apology. For 15 years of dismissing their help, for calling their moral philosophy aberrant, for treating them like naive children who didn't understand how the real galaxy worked. Yes, I'm sure they'll be very impressed by our apology. Sir, with respect, what else can we do? Kethros turned to stare at the tactical display, watching the red zones expand in real time. Nothing, Commander. Absolutely nothing. We made our choice, and now we live with the consequences. But, sir, surely they wouldn't just let us all die? They're humans. They helped people even when it wasn't in their interest. It's what they do. Was what they did, Kethros corrected. Past tense. We trained them out of it. As if summoned by his words, the main viewscreen activated to show an incoming transmission. The source was listed as Independent Vessel Aurora broadcasting from the edge of the core world system. The face that appeared on screen was instantly recognizable, Captain Lisa Harrison, the same human who had addressed the council 6 months ago. But, she looked different now. Older. Harder. More tired. This is Captain Harrison to any council authority, she said without preamble. I am requesting permission to transit through council space en route to the Meridian system. Kethros stepped forward. Captain Harrison, this is Admiral Kethros. Permission granted, of course. But, might I ask what brings you to the Meridian system? Harrison's expression didn't change. Evacuation operations. The Void Hunters will reach Meridian space within 72 hours. I'm extracting the human citizens who are trapped there. Just the human citizens? Kethros asked. Just the humans, Harrison confirmed. My ship can carry exactly 300 people. There are 297 human civilians in the Meridian system, plus 3 human scientists who were working on collaborative research projects when the borders closed. The implication was clear. The Meridian system contained approximately 40 billion people, and Harrison was going to save exactly 300 of them, the humans. Captain, Kethros said carefully, your ship appears to be quite advanced. Surely it could carry more than 300 people if necessary? Admiral, Harrison replied, my ship can carry exactly the number of people I choose to carry. And, I choose to carry humans only. Captain, there are children in the Meridian system. Families. Innocent people who have done nothing wrong. Harrison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Yes, there are. And, 8 months ago, those children and families belonged to species that voted unanimously to throw humanity out of galactic civilization. Their representatives stood in the council chamber and declared that human moral philosophy was aberrant and dangerous. The children didn't vote, Kethros said desperately. The families didn't choose this. No, Harrison agreed. They didn't. But, their governments did. Their species did. Their civilizations did. And, now they get to live with the consequences of those choices. This isn't justice, Kethros said. This is revenge. For the first time, Harrison's composure cracked slightly. Admiral, if this were revenge, I wouldn't be here at all. I wouldn't be risking my ship and my crew to save 300 humans from a system that's about to be consumed by cosmic horror. If this were revenge, I'd be sitting safely in human space drinking coffee and watching the galaxy burn on the news feeds. Then, why are you here? Because those 300 people are humans, Harrison said simply. And humans take care of humans. It's what we do. It's all we do now. The transmission ended, leaving Kethros staring at a blank screen. Around him, the command center continued its death watch over galactic civilization, tracking the Void Hunters' inexorable advance and the steady collapse of any organized resistance. Sir, Commander Ithek said quietly, there's one more thing. Intelligence reports suggest that several species are attempting to modify their ships with quantum drives based on stolen human technology. Any success? None that survived the attempt, sir. It appears that human quantum technology requires some form of biological interface that other species don't possess. Every attempt to reverse engineer it has resulted in catastrophic system failures. Of course. Even now, when the galaxy was dying, they were still trying to take what humanity had offered freely for 15 years. They still didn't understand that the technology wasn't the gift, the willingness to share it was. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're receiving another transmission on the human emergency frequencies. This one is different. How so? It's from Admiral Chen herself, sir. She's broadcasting from the edge of human space. Kethros felt a chill run through his circulatory system. Put it through. The view screen activated to show the bridge of a ship that looked more like a living organism than a mechanical construct. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the center, wearing the same uniform Kethros remembered, but everything else about her seemed different. She looked like someone who had seen the end of the world and was no longer surprised by anything. This is Admiral Chen to any remaining council authority, she said, her voice carrying across the empty channels that had once carried cries for help. I am transmitting this message as a final courtesy to species that were once our allies. Admiral, Kethros said, stepping forward, this is Admiral Kethros. We're here. Chen's eyes focused on him through the screen, and Kethros felt as if she were looking directly into his soul. Admiral Kethros. I remember you. You were one of the few who seemed to understand what we were trying to accomplish. Admiral Chen, the situation in galactic space has become difficult. The Void Hunters are, I know what they are, Chen interrupted. I know what they're doing. I know how many people are dying. Then, surely you understand that what you need, Chen said, her voice cutting through his words like a blade, is exactly what you always needed. You need to work together. You need to trust each other. You need to care more about the common good than about your individual advantages. You need to become the kind of galactic community that could coordinate a defense against existential threats. She paused, and, when she continued, her voice was soft but implacable. In other words, Admiral, you need to become everything we tried to help you become for 15 years. The same things you rejected because they required you to be better than you wanted to be. Admiral, please, Kethros said, and he could hear the desperation in his own voice. There has to be something you can do. Some way to help. Chen's expression softened slightly, and, for a moment, she looked like the woman who had spent 15 years patiently negotiating peace treaties and coordinating humanitarian aid. Admiral Kethros, I want you to understand something. This isn't about punishment. This isn't about making you suffer for your choices. This is about accepting that actions have consequences, and that some consequences can't be undone. What are you saying? I'm saying that the galaxy made its choice 8 months ago. You chose a universe where the strong survive and the weak perish. Where cooperation is weakness and mercy is aberrant. Where everyone takes care of themselves and no one interferes in anyone else's business. Chen gestured to something off-screen, and the display showed a tactical readout of the galaxy. The red zones had expanded even further, consuming more systems while they talked. Congratulations, Admiral. You have exactly the galaxy you voted for. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kethros alone with the weight of his species' choices and the knowledge that help was not coming. In the days that followed, more worlds fell to the Void Hunters. More species abandoned their allies to save themselves. More children's voices echoed through the empty human emergency frequencies, calling out to people who were no longer listening. And, in the deep archives of the Council Library, a single document was updated one final time, the formal record of humanity's expulsion from galactic civilization. A footnote was added, written in Admiral Kethros' own hand. We thought we were getting rid of an inconvenience. We were actually destroying the only thing that made us worth saving. The end came not with fire and fury, but with a whimper that echoed through empty space. Admiral Kethros stood alone on the observation deck of the last Council vessel, watching the core worlds burn in the distance. The Void Hunters had reached the galaxy's heart 3 weeks ago, and their feeding had accelerated beyond all projections. Entire star systems were going dark in a matter of hours instead of days. The great experiment of galactic civilization was ending exactly as humanity had predicted it would, not through external conquest, but through the failure of its constituent parts to work together when survival depended on cooperation. "Sir," came a voice from behind him. Kethros turned to see Commander Ithek approaching, her usual military bearing replaced by the hollow-eyed exhaustion that had become standard throughout what remained of the fleet. "Report, Commander," he said, though he was no longer sure why he bothered with military protocol when there was nothing left to command. "The evacuation of Terra Prime is complete, sir. We managed to save approximately 60,000 refugees before the planetary defenses fell." 60,000. Kethros remembered when Terra Prime had been home to 15 billion souls. The mathematics of extinction were becoming routine now. Count the survivors, ignore the dead, move on to the next catastrophe. "Where are they going?" he asked. "The refugee fleet is heading for the sanctuary stations in the outer dark," Ithek replied. "It's the only location we can confirm is still outside Void Hunter expansion patterns." The sanctuary stations. A collection of ancient space habitats built by an unknown species millions of years ago, discovered 2 centuries back and used as emergency shelters ever since. They were located in the empty space between galactic arms, far from any star system or natural resource that might attract the hunters. They were also designed to support maybe 1 million beings at most. The current refugee population heading toward them numbered over 2 billion. "Sir," Ithek continued, "I've also received reports from the last monitoring stations. The hunters have accelerated their feeding cycle. They're not just consuming energy anymore, they're dismantling matter at the quantum level. Everything they touch becomes part of their expansion matrix." Kethros nodded wearily. It made sense, in a horrifying way. The Void Hunters were learning, adapting, becoming more efficient with each system they devoured. What had started as cosmic predation was becoming something closer to universal digestion. "How long?" he asked. "Complete galactic consumption?" "Based on current expansion rates, 18 standard days, sir." 18 days. In 18 days, every star system, every world, every trace of 10 million years of galactic civilization would be reduced to raw quantum foam feeding an artificial construct created by a species that had died before the first council member had evolved consciousness. Sir, Ithek said hesitantly, there's something else. We've been monitoring the human emergency frequencies, and they've gone silent, sir. Completely silent. The last transmission was 3 days ago, a group of children from the vegan colonies asking if anyone was still listening. Kethros felt something break inside his chest. For 8 months, those frequencies had carried the desperate voices of the dying, calling out to humans who no longer answered.